The stars over Colony 7 were silent. The colony, a small human outpost on the edge of known space, had always been quiet. People lived simple lives here. Farmers grew crops on dusty soil. Engineers kept the machines running. Children played under the red sun, but tonight was different. Commander Alina Ray stood at the main tower, looking out at the black sky. Her eyes were tired. She had been up for hours, trying to understand the strange signals their scanners had picked up. Faint energy readings, strange movements at the edge of their system. It made no sense. Colony 7 was far from any trade routes or battles. There was no reason for ships to come this way, Commander. A voice came through the radio. It was Lieutenant Bren. His voice shook. You need to see this now. Lena hurried down the tower steps and ran into the control room. The large screen showed a view from one of their orbital satellites. Tiny light ships were entering the system, dozens of them. No, hundreds. What are we looking at? Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Bren shook his head. We don't. No response to hails. They're moving fast, Commander. And they're heading straight for us. Alina stared at the screen. Fear crept into her chest. She had seen pirate raids before, small groups, maybe 2 or 3 ships. But this was an army. Send the SOS, she said quietly. Bren hesitated. Yes. The Federation is far. They might not send it anyway, she snapped. And keep sending it until someone answers. Bren nodded and began typing. A deep alarm echoed through the colony. People stopped what they were doing. They looked up at the sky, confused. Mothers grabbed their children and ran to the bunkers. Everyone knew what that sound meant. Danger, the SOS left. Colony 7 in all directions, a desperate cry for help. This is Commander Alina Ray of Colony 7. We are under attack. Unknown forces. We need immediate assistance.
Yes.
If you can hear this, help us. Over and over, the signal repeated, racing through space, hoping to reach friendly ears. But the ships kept coming. Alina watched from the window. Bright flashes appeared as the first enemy ships entered the upper atmosphere. Strange shapes. Dark, spiny holes that didn't match any design she knew. They moved like predators, silent and fast. Colony defense guns opened fire, but the weapons were small, old, built to scare off raiders, not fight a fleet. The first shots hit one of the alien ships, but it didn't even slow down. Direct hit. No damage, Bren reported. His voice was flat, like he couldn't believe it. Hours passed. The battle was one-sided. Alien ships rained destruction from above. Buildings burned. Defense towers fell. The colony's small fighter squadron was wiped out in minutes. Alina kept sending the SOS. Her hands trembled as she watched her home fall apart. She didn't know who these attackers were. She didn't know why they came. But she knew one thing should help didn't come soon. No one would survive. Far away, across light years, the SOS reached Federation space. At a large command station orbiting the planet Vera Prime, officers gathered around a table. This can't be right, Admiral Corse said, frowning at the message. No one attacks that deep into our territory. It's a trick. But sir, the signal is real, and the ships described in the message don't match any known pirate groups. We should send a fleet, an officer urged. Corse hesitated. Sending ships would take days. And they were already dealing with other threats on the borders. He didn't want to risk losing more forces for what could be a trap. Prepare a task force, he said finally. But keep it small. If this is real, they'll have to hold out until we get there. But the SOS kept traveling. It passed systems. That didn't care. It passed old battlefields, dead colonies, and empty space. And then it reached the wrong ears, or maybe the right ones, on the edge of the galaxy. Where no law ruled, a massive fleet drifted in the darkness. These were the Deathworlders. Their ships were huge, dark, and scarred from battles. Their people were known for surviving on the most dangerous planets, where only the strong lived and the weak died. The galaxy feared them. Many believed they were monsters. The Deathworlder flagship received the SOS. It echoed through the ship commander. Gonda listened to the human voice. He heard the fear, the desperation. His second in command, Vera, stood beside him. A human colony. Easy prey for whoever is attacking. Let them burn, not our concern. But Kargan said nothing. He stared at the map, thinking. His eyes glowed. With a strange light, "Prepare the fleet," he said at last. Vera blinked. "Why? There's no profit in this." Kargan turned to her. His voice was like ice. "They called for help. We will answer. Before anyone else can." Back at Colony 7, the night had turned into hell. Fires raged. The remaining colonists hid in caves and bunkers, hoping to survive. Alina was trapped in the command center, her last radio destroyed. Above, the alien ships prepared for the final strike. The colony's last defenses were gone. And then, without warning, the sky changed. New ships appeared, dark, massive shapes that blotted out the stars. The alien attackers paused, confused by the sudden arrival. From the Deathworlder fleet, weapons powered up. The silent giants of the galaxy had come not as friends, not as enemies, but as something far more dangerous, as Deathworlders. And no one knew if the colony's salvation had just arrived, or its doom. The first thing Alina Ray noticed when she stepped outside was the silence. The sounds of laser fire, of explosions, and of desperate cries had stopped. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Surely, after the chaos, the sound would return. But it didn't. Above, dark ships hovered like ghosts in the sky, massive and incomprehensible. The familiar hum of the colony's generators was replaced by a low, ominous thrum, as if the air itself was being charged with energy. "Commander." Bren's voice crackled through her cum, barely audible. "You need to see this." Alina turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. He stood on the edge of the command center, his eyes fixed on the sky. "What is it?" she asked, dread filling her chest. He pointed to the sky. "They're not attacking." Confusion struck her like a punch. "What do you mean? Who's not attacking?" "The invaders. They've stopped." "Look." Elena's gaze followed his finger. The enemy ships, those dark, menacing vessels, had paused in their tracks. Their engines flickered like dying stars. They drifted in space, as if unsure of what to do next, and then the sky was filled with an even darker shadow. Another fleet had arrived. A series of warships, far larger than anything she had ever seen, slowly emerged from the edge of the system. They were enormous, massive beasts of war, with jagged, sharp angles and holes that gleamed with a menacing black sheen. They moved without a sound. The air seemed to warp around them. No human technology could match this. Alina felt it in her bones. These were not Federation ships. They're not Federation, Alina whispered, her mind racing. "Who are they?" Bren swallowed hard. "I don't know, but they're not here to help." Alina's heart dropped. The invaders had stopped attacking, but it didn't mean the situation was getting better. In fact, it was getting worse. The new fleet moved in. Their ships did not look like they were there to negotiate. Instead, they positioned themselves with eerie precision, surrounding the colony and the alien fleet that had been attacking it. Alina didn't understand. Why would these ships arrive and not attack the invaders immediately? Why just circle around? "I don't like this," Bren muttered. "They don't seem interested in us. Not yet, at least." The eerie stillness continued. And then without warning, a massive shape detached from the shadowed fleet. The largest of the ships, the flagship, moved toward the colony. Its presence was suffocating, the kind of silence that warned of a storm to come. Through the coms, Alina heard a deep voice, one that chilled her to the core, despite the words being simple. "Human colony, stand down," the voice boomed. It was not a request, it was a command. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't place the accent. It was nothing like any Federation officer she had ever heard. It was harsh, rough, and ancient-sounding, like the voice of someone who had spent centuries in the deepest pits of war. A shiver ran down her spine. "We have come to end this," the voice continued. The invaders do not belong here. Stay inside your homes. This is not your battle. Elena's mind spun. The invaders had already done so much damage to the colony. Now, these new ships, these strange beings, were telling them to stay inside? Do we do? Bren asked, his voice trembling. Elena's eyes flicked toward the sky, her thoughts racing. The new fleet wasn't Federation. It wasn't anyone they knew. These weren't allies. But if they were here to stop the invaders, they might have no choice but to trust them. Hold tight, she said, trying to sound calm. We wait. Inside the enemy fleet, the invaders were scrambling. For the first time since their arrival, they were confused. Their tactics had been flawless until the Deathworlder fleet had shown up. The captain of the alien fleet, being called Kresh, paced back and forth in his command center. He had expected a quick victory. The colony's defenses were weak, and the human resistance had been pitiful. But now something had changed. What are they? Gresh demanded, his voice low, filled with unease. Who are these ships? His second in command, a tall creature with black scales and multiple eyes, answered, We don't know. Their ships do not match anything in our records, Kresh snarled. We didn't come here to be stopped, came to take control of this sector. What is their purpose? What do they want? His second in command hesitated. We have heard of these beings. They're Deathworlders. The word hung in the air like a curse. Kresh's eyes widened. He knew of the Deathworlders. Everyone in the galaxy did. They were rumored to be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, known for their cruelty, strength, and brutality. No one dared to fight them. They were both feared and respected. Why are they here? Kresh growled. Unknown, the second in command replied, But they're not here to negotiate. They are here to stop us. Kresh turned to face his fleet. We will not be stopped. We will finish this. The colony is ours. And those Deathworlders, they will not stand in our way. Outside the colony, Alina stood in the shadow of the enormous Deathworlder flagship. She could see the massive ship's weapons power up, the sharp lines of its hull catching the light of the distant stars. The darkness of the ship seemed to block out everything else, making her feel as if the whole universe had fallen silent. For a moment, she thought she saw movement on the ship's surface figures, dark and indistinct. And then there was a flash of light, a signal, a message. It wasn't directed at the Federation fleet. It wasn't even directed at the invaders. The message was for them. For the humans of Colony 7. Stay out of our way. This is not your fight. We will deal with them. The message was clear, chilling. The Deathworlders weren't here to protect them. They were here to conquer, to fight, to destroy. And Colony 7 was just in the way. Alina swallowed hard. Fleet above her was no longer an ally. It was a threat. Her message was clear. The fight was about to begin. No one knew who would survive. The ground trembled beneath Elena's feet as she stepped out of the command center, her mind racing. Above, the Deathworlder fleet loomed like a shadow, its presence suffocating. The air was thick with tension, as though the entire galaxy was, holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. Commander Bren called out, his voice tight with fear.
We don't have much time.
Alina turned to him, her gaze steady. We're not giving up this colony, not without a fight. But as she looked at the burning remains of the once thriving settlement, she knew the odds were slim. The invaders had nearly wiped them out. The Deathworlders had made it clear they weren't there to help. They were there to end the fight. And their methods were unknown. It was a strange and terrifying combination. We don't have much of a defense left, Bren continued. Psst. Fighters are gone. The ground troops. There's barely enough of us to make a stand. What are we supposed to do? Alina didn't answer right away. She couldn't lie to him. The situation was grim, but she refused to give in. We hold on. The Deathworlders are here to stop the invaders. We have to make sure they finish the job. The question lingered in her mind, though. Why would they want to protect a human colony? She had never heard of the Deathworlders intervening for anyone. Their reputation for savagery was legendary. Their desire to conquer and destroy was known across the galaxy. The thought of their fleet surrounding Colony 7 was terrifying, Yet Alina couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. At least for now, the invaders had paused their assault. Inside the invader fleet, the tension was palpable. The ships that had attacked Colony 7 had stopped firing, confused by the sudden appearance of the Deathworlder fleet. They were aggressive by nature, ready to conquer and destroy. But they had not expected the arrival of a force that could overpower them, Captain. Kresh paced frantically across his command deck. The messages from his scouts had confirmed the worst. The Deathworlders were real. And their fleet was not something they could defeat easily. "What's their next move?" Kresh barked, turning to his officers. "They've surrounded us," one officer said. "They're not opening fire yet, but their weapons are powered up. They're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Kresh demanded. The officer hesitated. "For us to make a move?" Kresh clenched his fists. "Let them wait. We won't back down. We're here for this colony, and no one is going to stop us." Meanwhile, Alina stood in the shadow of the command center, watching as the massive Deathworlder ships hung in space like predators circling their prey. It was impossible to ignore the overwhelming feeling of helplessness creeping into her chest. The attackers had stopped, yes, but for how long? She looked over at Bren, who was manning the remaining cum station. He had been trying to get a message out to the Federation, but the interference from the invader fleet had blocked all attempts. "Alina, I think we're about to get some answers," Bren said, his voice tense. "The Deathworlders are moving, Alina." He didn't need to ask what he meant. She could see it in the sky. The massive ships had begun to shift. They were positioning themselves in a perfect formation, cutting off any potential escape routes for the invaders. "Ready the remaining defenses?" she ordered. "Whatever happens, we fight." The Deathworlder flagship loomed larger as it approached the heart of Colony 7's atmosphere. The massive ship glided forward with terrifying grace, its engines humming softly. Lena watched as it moved into position above the last remnants of the colony, its guns aimed directly at the invader fleet. Then, without warning, the Deathworlder ships unleashed a barrage of firepower. Bright streaks of energy lit up the sky as beams of pure destruction rained down on the invader ships. The alien vessels, once so confident in their power, were thrown into chaos. Shielding failed, hulls cracked and shattered, explosions erupted in space. Bright flashes of light in the endless darkness. The invaders screamed in panic, scrambling to return fire, but it was futile. The Deathworlders' weapons were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The sheer destructive power left them no room to react. Elena's heart raced as she watched the invader ships burn one by one. The battle was swift, brutal, and one-sided. "What? What is happening?" Bren asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's over," Elena whispered. The invaders had underestimated their enemies, and it had cost them everything. Inside the Deathworlder flagship, Kargan stood at the command console, watching the destruction unfold on his view screen. His expression was cold, distant. There was no satisfaction in the violence, no joy in the chaos. This was simply what they did. This was how the Deathworlders operated. "Are we finished here?" Vera, his second-in-command, asked. Kargan nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the remnants of the invader fleet. "Yes, they're gone. But we won't leave the humans alive." "Will we?" Vera pressed. Kargan turned to face her. His gaze was fierce, but his voice remained calm. "Humans are insignificant. They are no threat to us. But the invaders, they were." Paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Once. The invaders are dealt with. We leave. We have no business here." Back on Colony 7, the battle was over. The colony had been saved, but at what cost? The invaders were gone, their ships reduced to debris scattered in the dark. The Deathworlder fleet loomed over the planet, its weapons silent now, but their presence was enough to send a clear message. Elena's thoughts were racing. They had been saved, but they were also prisoners to these powerful, terrifying beings. What did they want? Why had they intervened? But there was no time to dwell on those questions now. They had survived the night, but the future was uncertain. The Deathworlders hadn't come to help, They had come to fight, to destroy, to conquer. And the humans of Colony 7 were caught in their wake as Alina looked out over the smoldering ruins of the colony. She knew this was only the beginning. The Deathworlders had made it clear they would deal with the invaders. But what would happen when their work was done? Colony 7 was silent in the days that followed. The Deathworlder fleet had vanished into the dark, but their presence still weighed on every survivor's mind.
Ow.
The people moved like ghosts through the ruins, clearing debris, burying their dead, and trying to rebuild. But no one spoke of hope. Not yet. Alina stood atop a broken wall, overlooking what was left of the colony. The fields that once fed thousands were burned black. The housing blocks were little more than charred skeletons. The landing pads, where ships once came and went with supplies and travelers, were twisted metal. But they were alive. That counted. For something, Alina, Bryn said, approaching her carefully. He held a small device in his hand. We picked up something. Transmission. Her heart jumped. From the Deathworlders? No. Different code. Weak signal, but real. Alina took the device, listening closely. The voice on the other end was faint, crackling with static. This is the freighter Willow. We are damaged. Requesting permission to approach Colony 7. We need assistance. A freighter? Out here? It didn't make sense. Colony 7 had been marked as unsafe. No one should be near. Tell them to stay back until we can confirm who they are, Alina ordered. Bren hesitated. What if they're really in trouble? Elena's gaze hardened. Then we'll help, but not until we know it's safe. Can't take chances. Not after what happened. Out in the dark space beyond Colony 7, the Willow drifted toward the planet. Its engines sputtered, leaving a faint trail of ionized gas. Inside the freighter, Captain Sora wiped sweat from her brow, her hands tight on the controls. Come on, come on. Someone answers, she muttered. The ship's systems were failing. Life support was weak. She had lost most of her crew to an attack days earlier. Pirates or something worse. She wasn't sure. Her co-pilot, Laren, leaned over the console. Colony 7 just responded. They're asking us to hold position. Sora swore under her breath. We can't hold much longer. But she knew the colony had reason to be cautious. Everyone in this part of the galaxy had heard the stories. The Deathworlders had been here. No one wanted to be next. Back on the ground, Alina stood in the command center, eyes locked on the freighter's approach. She hated this. Hated feeling powerless. But Colony 7 wasn't strong enough to fight off another attack. Not yet. Scan them again, she said quietly. Look for weapons. Look for anything that feels wrong. Bren worked the controls. I don't see anything, no weapons. Our engines are nearly dead. If they're faking, it's the best act I've ever seen. Alina took a deep breath. Fine. Let them land, but we stay on alert. The Willow came down hard on the ruined landing pad, its landing struts sparking as they touched the twisted metal. The ship groaned under its own weight, systems failing one by one. Alina led a small team out to meet it, weapons ready. The freighters. Ramp dropped, and Sora stepped out, her hands raised. We're not here to fight, she said, her voice hoarse. We just need help. Alina studied her. The woman looked exhausted, her uniform torn and stained. Behind her, Laren limped down the ramp, his arm in a sling. Who attacked you? Alina asked. Shook her head. We don't know. They came out of nowhere, took our cargo, killed my crew. We barely got away. Elena's heart sank. Another threat, another enemy. This part of the galaxy was becoming a graveyard. All right, she said at last. We'll help. But if you're lying, if this is a trick. She let the warning hang in the air. I understand, Sora said. It's not a trick, I swear. The survivors of Colony 7 worked to repair the Willow and tend to the freighter's wounded crew. A sense of unease spread through the colony. The Deathworlders had left, but the dangers of the galaxy had not. Night fell, and the stars came. Out again, cold, distant, and silent. Alina stood outside, looking up. Why had the Deathworlders spared them? Why had they really come? And what new enemy was hunting the ships that dared cross this space? The questions had no answers. Not yet. But deep down, Alina knew the truth. The worst was still to come. The quiet over Colony 7 didn't last long. While the people worked to repair their broken world and the freighter Willow, a new storm was already gathering beyond the stars. Alina felt it before anyone said a word, a deep unease in her gut, a sense that the galaxy wasn't finished with them yet. That night, as she stood on the edge of the colony ruins, staring at the black sky, Bryn ran up behind her, breathless. "Commander, you need to see this." She turned sharply. "What is it now?" Bryn handed her a small tablet, its screen showing grainy scans. "Ships, at least 4. Just beyond sensor range. No transponder signals, no IDs, just watching." Alina stared at the image. Dots of light, cold, silent, waiting. "Pirates?" she asked. "Maybe," Bryn said, voice low. "Or something worse." Alina's mind raced. The Deathworlders' warning echoed in her head. "Next time, we may not leave you standing." Could these ships be Deathworlder scouts, or enemies drawn by the destruction the Deathworlders had caused? She didn't know. But she did know one thing: they had to act inside the Willow. Sora worked to restart the main systems. The colony's engineers had done their best, but the freighter was still a wreck. Laren appeared at her side. His face was pale. "Captain, we've got company." "I saw," she said. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Sora clenched her jaw.
We
"Can't stay here. We'll draw fire on this colony if those ships come closer." "We can't leave either," Laren said. "Engines won't hold." Sora slammed a fist onto the console. She hated this, feeling helpless. Trapped, Alina gathered. What was left of her defense team? Half were injured. All were tired. But they were all she had. "We're not going to wait for those ships to come to us," she told them. "We'll set up outer sensors. We'll prepare traps. If they land, we make it hurt." The people nodded. They had no choice. That night, small teams moved through the dark ruins, planting mines and setting up makeshift guns. They knew it wouldn't stop a full assault, but it might buy them time. And time was the one thing they didn't have. Out in space, silent ships drifted. Closer. No signals. No warnings. Just the slow, steady approach of death. Inside one of those ships, a tall, thin figure stood at a darkened viewport. His name was Zeth. His crew were scavengers, looters of battlefields, hunters of the weak. He had seen what the Deathworlders had done here. He had watched from the shadows as they burned the invader fleet. And now he had come to pick the bones clean. A broken colony. A crippled freighter. "This will be easy," he said with a cold smile. But Zeth didn't know the humans of Colony 7. Not yet. As the ships closed in, Alina stood ready. Her people were hidden in the ruins. The guns were powered. The mines were armed. And still, she felt the weight of doom. "They'll come at dawn," Bryn said quietly. Alina nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The sky above Colony 7 was black. But on the horizon, the first hint of light touched the wreckage of the world. Another battle was coming. The survivors would have to fight once more, not just for their colony, but for the right to exist, and far beyond, unseen by all, the Deathworlder. Fleet had stopped again. Watching, waiting. Would they return? Or would this be the end for Colony 7? The stars above Colony 7 felt colder now. The invader fleet had been wiped out, their ships nothing more than burning wrecks, drifting through space. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. The Deathworlder fleet still hovered, casting long, dark shadows over the broken colony. Alina stood on a ridge outside the command center, staring up at the sky. The Deathworlder flagship loomed largest, its sharp black edges cutting across the stars. The same thought kept running through her mind. Why were they still here? Commander Bryn's voice crackled through the unit they're sending. A signal. Alina's heart tightened. Patch it through. A deep, growling voice filled the air, cold and unfeeling. Human colony. The threat is gone. Remember this next time, we may not leave you standing. Elena's breath caught. In her throat, the words were simple, but they carried weight. A warning. A reminder that the Deathworlders had not come as friends. The voice continued. You are in our territory now. Keep to your world. Do not call for help again. And just like that, the transmission ended. No explanation, no demands. Just that. Chilling promise. Bren ran out from the command center, his face pale. Alina, what does that mean? Are they going to attack us now? Alina shook her head slowly, still staring at the massive ships. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. So why are they still here? She didn't have an answer. The Deathworlder ships floated in place, silent and still, as if they were watching. Waiting. We need to stay inside, Alina said at last. Get the people underground. No one comes out until I say so. Bryn hesitated, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He nodded and ran off to gather the survivors. Alina stayed where she was, listening to the hum of the Deathworlder engines. Above, she felt small, powerless. The colony had survived the invaders. But now they lived under the shadow of something even worse, something they didn't understand. Inside the Deathworlder flagship, Kargan stood at the viewport watching. The broken human colony below. His crew waited for his orders, but he said nothing for a long time. Vera finally broke the silence. Why let them live? They're weak. It's only a matter of time before someone else comes to take them. Kargan's eyes stayed on the colony. Because their kind fights, even when they should surrender. Even when death is certain. I respect that. Vera frowned. That's no reason to spare them. No, Kargan agreed. But it's reason enough for now. He turned to his crew, prepared to leave. We've done what we came for. Back on the surface, Alina gathered the last of the survivors in the underground shelter. Children clung to their mothers. The injured lay on makeshift beds, too weak to move. The fear in the room was thick enough to touch. A boy, no older than 10, looked up at her. Are they going to kill us? Alina knelt beside him. No, she said gently. They're leaving. Why did they help us? He asked. She didn't know how to answer. She could only shake her head. Maybe they didn't help. Us. Maybe they were only here for the fight. The boy didn't seem to understand, but he nodded, trusting her words. Hours passed. The Deathworlder fleet stayed where it was, unmoving, watching. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, they began to leave. One by one, massive ships turned, their engines glowing bright as they slipped back into the darkness of space. The flagship was the last to go, its shadow passing over colony. 7, like a storm cloud. And then they were gone. Alina stood outside, watching the sky return to its quiet emptiness. She felt no joy, no relief, only questions. Why had the Deathworlders come? Why had they left the colony standing? And would they return? She turned to Bryn, who stood beside her. Start rebuilding, she said. We can't waste time. To be ready next time? We might not be so lucky. Bren nodded. Above them, the stars shone cold and distant. The Deathworlders had left, but their warning remained. Alina knew the colony's greatest. Battle was still to come. The first rays of dawn touched the broken colony as the silent ships approached, 4 of them dark and jagged, like vultures coming to feed on the dead. They drifted lower, engines humming, cutting through the morning air like blades. Alina stood. At the edge of the main square, her weapon ready, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. Around her, what was left of Colony 7's defenders waited in the shadows. Every gun was aimed at the sky. Every trap was set. They're coming. Down fast, Bryn said beside her, his voice tight with fear. Alina didn't look at him. She couldn't. Hold until I give the order. The scavenger ships landed hard, kicking up clouds of dust and ash. Their ramps lowered and out came Zeth's raiders tall, thin figures in dark armor, their weapons sharp and cruel. They spread. Out quickly, moving through the ruins like they owned the place, Zeth stepped off his ship last. His pale face split in a grin as he looked around. Weak, he said to his crew. This will be done in minutes. But then the first trap went off. A blast shook the ground, sending 2 of the raiders flying. Screams filled the air as hidden guns opened fire, cutting down more of the scavengers. The ruins came alive with human defenders, their shots deadly, and precise Alina gave the order. Now, hit them hard. Bren and the others fired from cover, their weapons flashing in the morning light. The raiders weren't expecting a fight. They stumbled, fell back, tried to regroup. Zeth's grin vanished. "Kill them all?" he roared. His raiders charged, but the humans held their ground. Every step the enemy took cost them blood. Corner of the colony became a death trap at the wrecked landing pad. Sora and Laren fought to bring the Willow's weapons online. The old freighter groaned as its damaged systems sparked to life. "We've got one shot at this," Sora said. Through gritted teeth, target their ship. Laren nodded, his hands flying over the controls. The Willow's main gun powered up, a low hum rising as it charged. Outside, Zeth's crew began to falter.
Ouch.
Their numbers dropped fast under the humans' fierce defense. But still they came, desperate to finish what they'd started. And then, the Willow fired. The blast hit one of the scavengers' ships dead on, tearing it apart in a ball of fire. The shockwave knocked raiders off their feet. The tide turned. Alina saw her chance. Push them back. Don't let them escape. The defenders surged forward, forcing the raiders to retreat. Panic spread through the scavenger ranks. Zeth's men ran for their ships, their courage broken, but it was too late. Another explosion rocked the field as a second scavenger ship went up in flames. This time, it's triggered by a hidden mine. The remaining 2 ships lifted off, leaving there. Dead behind, fleeing into the sky, silence fell over Colony 7. The battle was over. Alina stood in the middle of the square, her chest heaving, her weapon shaking in her hands. Around her, the survivors emerged from cover, their faces dirty and tired but alive. "They're gone," Bren said, almost in disbelief. "For now," Alina replied. She knew the truth. This wasn't the end. The galaxy had seen what the Deathworlders had done here. Now more predators would come. But for this day, they had one. High above, unseen by all, the Deathworlder fleet still watched. Their sensors had recorded everything. Their leaders studied the human colony's fight. And finally, a new message was sent, a message that would change everything. The sun was high over Colony 7 now. Smoke from the battle drifted into the sky, marking the place where the colony had stood its ground. The survivors moved quietly, tending to the wounded, gathering the fallen. Alina stood at the edge of the ruined square, looking up. Her heart was heavy, but a small spark of pride burned inside. They had fought back. They had survived. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. And she was right. The warning came first. A deep hum from the sensors. A ripple in the air as something massive entered orbit. Bren ran to her side, his face pale. "It's them," he whispered, "the Deathworlders. They're back." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. "How many?" Bren showed her the scan. The fleet was bigger this time. More ships. Heavier ships. Ships built for war. Why would they come back now? Bren asked. Alina didn't answer. She didn't know, but she had a terrible feeling. The Deathworlder ships moved into position above the colony. And then, for the first time, a voice spoke over the coms deep, cold and clear. "Human colony. You have fought well." Lena stared at the speaker, not sure she believed what she was hearing. "We watched your battle. You defended your weak. You stood your ground against greater force. These are traits we respect." There was a pause. The voice grew softer, though still powerful. "When we came before, we tested you. We needed to see what you were. Many in the galaxy fall to their knees. Many beg. You did not. You fought. You bled. You lived." Lena gripped the cum tightly. "What do you want from us?" the voice replied. "To offer you a place. The galaxy is no longer safe for the weak. A storm is coming. Those who stand alone will fall. But you, Deathworlders like Usu, will stand with us." Shock rippled through the survivors. Deathworlders? Was that what they had become? Lena took a deep breath. And if we refuse? The voice was silent for a moment. You won't, because you understand, because you have seen. The galaxy ignored your call for help. Only we answered, and we will answer again if you join us. The fleet above waited. Alina turned to her people. Faces bruised and burned. Eyes filled with fear, but also strength. They had stood against death. They had stood together. She spoke quietly but firmly. We can't survive this galaxy alone. We all know that now. There were no arguments. No doubts. The decision was made. She raised the come. We'll stand with you, but not as slaves, as equals. The voice replied, and for the first time, there was a hint of respect in its tone. Agreed, welcome, Deathworlders. And so, the survivors of Colony 7 became something new. No longer just a broken colony on a forgotten world. They were part of a force that would shake the galaxy. The Deathworlder fleet descended, not to destroy, but to rebuild. To train, to prepare. Because beyond the stars, greater threats waited. And this time, humanity would not face them alone. Galaxy had ignored their call for help, but now the galaxy would hear their roar.